You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello, and yes, you are listening to Orange County's longest running business talk show, and I am your host, Rick Franzi. And boy, do we have a good show planned for you. Why do you ask? Because Scott Cannon, CEO of BigRentz, is our guest. And Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rick. Pleasure to be here.
So let's kick this off on a personal note. I'd like your origin story. Take us back in time and talk to me about the inspiration, motivation you had for joining BigRentz.
Well, I was actually retired by the age of 42. And I had come off a 10-year sprint at another mid-sized company that we sold ultimately to a private equity group. And I had no intention to ever come out of retirement and be CEO again. But when I was introduced to the company through a private equity sponsor that I had a relationship with, and no pun intended, I like to solve big, difficult problems. And, if you look at BigRentz, it presented a unique opportunity to transform a heavily fragmented space with technology. And my experience in logistics made me realize the inefficiency I'd seen in my previous tenure in other sectors existed heavily in construction, just at a more pronounced level. And the construction industry was overdue for modernization. And my prior job, it was an industry that had been run by founders, but it was quite advanced. The companies were 25, 30, 40 years old. And I got to ride that wave of private equity coming into the space that professionalized those space, consolidated it, rolled it up. And if I look at construction, particularly in rental equipment, it's kind of at that transformation point too. And it's hopefully I ride that wave correctly and sort of same end result. I'll also say that I've seen where just getting tiny inefficiencies that haven't been addressed for decades and how they sort of transform companies. Lastly, it was people got me to come to this company. I have two of the most incredible colleagues, my CFO and my CTO. And when you've had an exit or two, you can have a policy of picking and choosing and being discerning who you work with. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, they're two of the smartest, most talented people I've ever worked with in my entire life. They're also the two most stubborn people I've ever worked with in my entire life. And so that friction and for different reasons, that friction of being stubborn along with me has resulted in a better product. And it's been enjoyable to really work with talented people.
So you probably did a certain amount of due diligence before you came off the beach and put your Corona down and said, okay, I'm going to go back and work full time now. I don't know about the Corona piece. I made that up, but it fits the model of sitting on the beach in Southern California. What have you learned since joining BigRentz as the CEO?
Well, construction has a productivity problem. If I were getting a TED talk about what I've learned, that would be the lead tagline. If you look at basically the last 80 years, since the mid 1940s, construction productivity overall as an industry has only improved about 25%. So it's basically flat over 80 years. Whereas if you look at manufacturing, it's up over 1,500%. And so in the last 20 years, productivity gains have been about 1% per year for construction, but the overall economy is 2.8, and some sectors leading the way at 3 or 4% productivity gains every year. That's a real cost to a space, and about 35% of a work week in construction is spent on non-optimal activities. So looking for that piece of equipment, getting a new supplier on board, just trying to chase down things that could be done more effectively and efficiency with tools used heavily in other spaces would save a ton of money. And on an annual basis, it's $177 billion of lost productivity to construction every single year.
Well, that's a lot of money to go after. So let's talk about BigRentz, Scott. And so help us and the audience to understand what's your niche, who you're helping, what problems are you solving, and talk to me about the type of clients that get the most value out of partnering and working with BigRentz.
So the company started as a marketplace. So if you think about other famous marketplaces like a in Uber, and so forth. That requires a significant amount of capital in many, many, many years. And the founder of this company was to basically do that. And what I discovered, and where we pivoted multiple times, was that's just not terribly interesting to investors, and it's a difficult problem. You have to buy basically an industry. And it helped small rental companies, particularly mom and pop, multi-generational businesses, advertise online, which is still a core part of what we do. We still have a marketplace. But the company's evolved into a full construction procurement platform. So we don't only just address the e-commerce tools, we give tools to larger customers, particularly ones that do nationwide work across the United States, or big mega projects that spend $750,000 or above per year, the tools to run their projects more efficiently and save money. And it works for the guy that's going to do a home improvement project as a local contractor as well, but it's really geared towards companies that maybe do nationwide rollouts. So think about a technology upgrade at a Home Depot or CVS, and you're going to have to go to 1,500 locations across the United States and have to monitor how many suppliers you're going to use to fulfill that. And it can't be done by one. And I'll give you an example. A customer we brought on board this year, we've done, I think, 1,800 job sites, and we've used over 200 rental companies to fulfill that project for them. That simply can't be done by anybody else, and that's what we've designed here. And as we evolve, we're going to allow customers to use the same tools that we use and sell it in a SaaS product. So if you think sort of it's the three pieces that sort of interweave on the same platform, you have a marketplace, a procurement platform, a services platform, and a SaaS platform that all work in the same place.
So I take it the name BigRentz really comes from the first part of the business model that you had talked about, the marketplace. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's an established brand. The BigRentz name sort of will always work in the rental elements of it. But as we sort of transform the business into a SaaS product, there'll be other product names brought to you by BigRentz in small print. But the construction industry itself, just in the United States, is roughly $2.4 trillion. And globally, it's 13-14 trillion. It's a space that's been ripe for disruptive sort of, technology for some time. And, it's an industry that has a high level of default rates. It's really hard. I'll tell you, the business folks that run construction companies are some of the best business people on the planet because they have to rob Peter to pay Paul. And it's akin to running restaurants. A lot of restaurants go out of business. I think half of contractors go out of business in the first 7-8 years. And I think it's like 60-70% in the first 20. And it's a laggard in terms of EBITDA sort of profitability. It generates 4 to 5% EBITDA gains. But just applying tools like what we're trying to do, take it from a single digit EBITDA to a double digit, and start to look, capital will start to look at construction more like technology as those productivity gains are made. And it's such a big space. It really is open for a lot of technology gain that didn't exist before BigRentz.
So when you stepped in the door and you said yes, did you think there was this type of regeneration of the business, or were you coming in to sort of fix the business?
I think it's more the latter, and then the former evolves over time. So, we're talking offline. Running a business is incredibly hard. Trying to disrupt a space as big as construction is akin to trying to boil the ocean. It's just not possible, right? And I think just iterating on the business and listening to customers has really formed where we're at. We've done 500,000 rentals in the lifespan of BigRentz. It's roughly a 10-year-old company. And, it's $500 million of revenue has been pushed through the system. And the technology that was built before I showed up, we spent the first 3 or 4 years just refactoring it because it was built too early. Didn't really understand where the market really was. And we spent the last 3 or 4 years building a new platform to basically tackle it. And we've had a horse trade there because in a lot of venture-backed companies, you want hyper growth. Right. And we sacrificed hyper growth to really make sure the foundation was ready and it really was a product fit for the space. And so what you'll see out of BigRentz is there's basically an inflection point. You'll see just rampant growth the next 5, 6, 7 years, but it's that investment of time and energy to get it right. And if we could refound the company all over again, we would have spent the 4 or 5 years to do that. And once you have a company that's up and running, it's like fixing an airplane in the air. You just can't land it. It's got to keep flying. So it's taken a little longer and cost a little bit more, but ultimately we have such a better product and a better fit that I think customers are going to benefit from the time it's taken to do it right.
I have to tell you, as I was listening to that, Scott, it takes a certain amount of conviction and confidence to be able to say, trust me, we do this now, this is going to be the payoff, because eventually people are going to look to you and say, okay, bring us the payoff. So you know all too well, right?
Rick, there's a tagline that, if I were going to write a book about my business life, it would be called Resilience Through Strategic Purpose. So, there's just holding on and just trying to get through it. That's a certain skill that's learned over time. And I think entrepreneurs and CEOs understand how to do that. But there's got to be a reason to do it. And you're right. When is that big paycheck coming? And it's a difficult thing. Particularly, we're very short-term focused in our investment cycles. Typical PE firm is 3 to 5 years and flip it to the next guy. And, right. It takes an average company 9, 10, 11 years before it becomes investable or sort of saleable for typical. So that cycle has to change a couple of times and people don't make a lot of money. In this case, we've been resilient and we've been very patient, and it's not always easy, but it's the right thing to do. And I'm 6.5 years in the chair. I'd say we're early because we're really at that inflection point now.
Yeah, there were probably, I'm not going to speak for you, but there might have been a couple quiet moments at night where you're like, am I sure I'm going to pull this off? But we wouldn't want to attest to that here on the radio show. But as the leader,
I had hair.
Fair enough. Yeah. People don't appreciate the stress sometimes that sits on the CEO's desk, especially when you're flexing and changing the business model. And there's always uncertainty in business,
and not just on the CEO. I tell you, all employees feel it. And when pushing organizational change is really, really, really difficult, and it's difficult on the people themselves too. And they have the concerns about do I have job security? Is my job obsolete? They got to go home and pay their bills. They have families to support. It's hard on everybody. And there's I forget what it's called, but there's in the middle of it, people get very short with each other. It seems like it's a failure. It's not going to work out. Having been through this exercise once before, it gives us more comfort that we're going to succeed and we're going to do well.
There's no substitute for experience in business. It really is very beneficial. Let's take it in a little different direction. Maybe you could share with my audience a piece of business advice that you received that you found valuable that you could pay it forward on the show.
Well, it's going to seem very straightforward, but you can't scale what you can't measure. And the idea has been that sort of guided my approach at BigRentz, that we built a platform that's heavily data driven to ensure that every decision is based on real insights and allowing us to scale efficiently. We invested a lot of time to develop a quality system. We brought my former chief operating officer from my prior company here to employ a lot of the things and the fundamental changes that we built in my last business to redo it again. There's no secret sauce. It is just good, straightforward, every day, creating a system which you can drive decisions based on real information and quality and fixing problems that come up in a process and a standard. We're ISO 9001. It guides how we deal with problems, that we get to the root cause. We go back. It's constant evolution of improvement, and it never ends.
And that sounds straightforward and obvious, but really solving root cause problems is more difficult than many times people appreciate, because there's a lot of symptoms that look like root causes that are just false positives that aren't really the problem.
Rick, we also have an instant gratification society, right? So some of those problems, if they're systemic, take more work to get at and to fix, and aren't going to give somebody the immediate result they want. And but when completed, solves a whole host of problems down the road.
Yeah, and sometimes it requires behavioral change, which comes back to what you had said earlier. Sometimes the new system doesn't feel like it's an improvement over what they used to do, and staying with that change can be a difficult thing for people.
Exactly.
So, all right, let's talk about technology, because the more I learn about BigRentz, the more I sense that in addition to the market, you're a technology company.
That's right.
There's a lot of advanced value that's coming off of technology and innovation. How do you see artificial intelligence? Is BigRentz leveraging it? Just talk to us about your philosophy in that area.
We definitely are. I mean, like every business is using AI technology in some form or format, right? We use it in nascent ways in our marketing, our communication. We use it to write code. Probably 35–40% of the code written by our engineers is written by AI. And that's fairly consistent in other industries too. But what we really did a deep dive. We use a lot of GIS and a lot of AI. We have a neural network. And the quickest way to describe it to you is if you imagine your table, and we have 14,000 locations of our suppliers across the United States. We've drawn little maps of areas that they're likely to deliver to. And if you take a pin and stick it in a location, it crosses multiple shapes and immediately tells you what suppliers are available and so forth. And then we use a neural network to look at the propensity of a supplier to say they have something, look at their availability, what their cost is, to predict where our cost is going to be. Ultimately, customers will be able to do this for themselves too. We look at their performance. We use seasonality. We take competitive analysis. And it used to take a supercomputer, maybe not at the level, but a high-powered machine in an Amazon facility about a week to recalculate and refactor anytime you made changes. And now that's infused in our code of our new platform, lives and breathes there as it's actually changed. And so shapes that used to take a week now update within an hour. And the ability to update in real time without human intervention is incredible. And so our platform is just infused with this AI technology, and it's super cool. And it started with, I wish I pulled it out earlier, just a big binder of yellow paper, and I drew out the earliest model for our pricing methodology by just looking at data in Excel. And now it just lives and breathes on its own technology, and it's advanced past the point of understanding by somebody like me. We have a data scientist that does this all day long, but we really are a tech company that have tools for customers to use. We have this great network that's always going to be part of our business, but we'll see us to start to plug into other network businesses to allow a full, job site life cycle that includes not just equipment, but also materials and people and trades.
That's exciting, because the problem starts with one factor. Okay, a big piece of equipment that I only use occasionally. And so how do I get it most efficiently to the job site? Who has the best price? And you become a marketplace. But now you see that thinking can solve other problems that those same customers have, is what I think I hear you say.
Yeah, it's very perceptive. And I'll tell you, it came organically. Customers drove us to this. And a lot of our customers, if you imagine like any job site, 90% of construction is pre-planned. And it's about you're trying to get multiple things to land in the same place at the same time. You want a trade to show up, plumber, electrician, whatever, the piece of equipment and the materials. And it can't be early, and it definitely can't be late, because you're just burning through money.
Right.
And being able to have all those live in one system, and the way we constructed our system, equipment's very complex. It looks simple from the outside, but I assure you, the amount of iterations go beyond a typical procurement software package. And what we saw, we did 11 different price methods. You can put a technician or a tradesman on the job site with a piece of equipment and with materials in our platform. nobody's built anything like this. This is the first time it's been done. So we're excited. We launch our new platform in about 7 weeks. And from a SaaS perspective, we start selling that early next year. We think it's revolutionary.
As we talked before, I have clients who are in the construction space, and the planning, and it's always fixing the things that either didn't go right or you didn't anticipate going wrong. That's where the profit gets eaten and the time gets wasted. And if you can, that's a big problem that the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. And that sounds like you have a tiger by the tail, not only in the US, but it sounds like you have a global appetite.
Yeah, we've built, because my background was international logistics. So I've done business in 150 countries around the world. We built our platform in mind of using other metrics and currency. So and if you look at the markets globally, they're heavily fragmented and have the same challenges that we do here in the United States. The US is a leader. We have more construction activity than anywhere else in the world right now. All things considered, our economy is doing, depending on your own perspective, is actually doing better than most other people. And the same tools and processes we use here can be used in other places as well.
And I think that's what I love, that you have that experience, because that's my experience as well. In that, outside of the US, the idea of scaling is much more challenging because you have much smaller economies that are somewhat protective. Even though they're all in maybe the EU, there's still a little bit of resistance to move outside of their borders in many ways. And that's a challenge for them. And brings inefficiency.
We're an explorer country. Like we're all immigrants. We have a mentality of trying to fix and disrupt and change things that other countries around the world don't necessarily, it's not native to their culture. And I think that gives us a leg up in terms of bringing solutions to other places.
See, aren't you glad you came off the beach? Isn't this exciting? Who knew, right? 7 years ago.
Just to be clear, I wasn't on the beach. I was dealing with, I was raising a family, but
Okay.
this is, one of the other things I didn't say in terms of why I came here is I need to be intellectually challenged. This is such a big market. I used the example earlier in our conversation about trying to boil an ocean. And I'm just crazy enough to try to do it. So I love this company. I love the people we work with. I really do believe we have something, and it's not self-serving in terms of like, I work for this company. I wouldn't work here if I didn't believe those things. And we've done so much good work. I just can't wait to share it with as many people as possible.
I'm glad you're sharing it here today on our show. We might have covered it, but I want to make sure I give you a chance to share your vision for the future of BigRentz, Scott.
Well, my vision's where we have construction projects powered by an invisible, seamless technology that optimizes every decision. So imagine job sites that are connected to ecosystems where AI predicts equipment needs, understands supply chain disruptions before they occur, and no longer has project delays due to inefficiencies. I know it sounds like pie in the sky, but I really do believe that's possible. Plug this into BIMs and other modeling to really understand the cost of a project before you engage in it, and to try to remove inefficiency before it becomes a problem. Your example earlier in terms of the things you don't plan for are what eat profit in this space. So trying to be able to anticipate those things before they occur, factor for them in terms of how you budget and how you engage in the project, and eliminate where you can.
Yeah, I think, people that are DIYers, maybe they can't appreciate it, but how many times do people go back to Home Depot for a home project because they didn't have this or didn't know about that? Now multiply that as a business model and take that times your whole workforce, and all of a sudden you can't finish the project because the guy doesn't have the right wrench, and that's a problem. So
Exactly.
All right. So if someone wants to reach out to you, maybe on LinkedIn, and learn more about BigRentz Online, how do they do that?
Well, I'm always willing to, and I engage with anybody that reaches out via LinkedIn. Any professional that wants to, find me on LinkedIn, Scott Cannon. Also look at our follow BigRentz. We put out a ton of information consistently. Also go to our website, www.bigrentz.com, BIGRENTZ. And I'm transparent. I'm easy to get a hold of. So call, ask questions, bounce ideas. I'd be willing to talk to anybody anytime.
Thank you. I know you're super busy. You got a lot going on, but you carved out this time to share your story with my audience, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Rick, it was fantastic. I appreciate it as well. Thank you.
And thank you to the audience. You're part of Orange County's longest running business talk show and podcast. If you're an Orange County entrepreneur and you have a story that you'd like to share, or maybe you're a nonprofit leader of an Orange County nonprofit and you would like to share your mission and vision, reach out to me. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, I'm Rick, R-I-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. And in the connection request, let me know you have an interest in being a guest. If we are connected, send me a message through LinkedIn or an email. And between Haley, our producer, and myself, we can help get you ready so you can be a future guest on the show. Until the next time we all have a chance to be together, I hope your business decisions move your company in a positive direction.